Hello and welcome to Wednesday Warfare, where I review NXT and AEW Dynamite back to back and try and figure out which show won for the week. And as always, like what you like, don't be a dick. Let's begin. NXT opens up with a grudge match as Shotzi Blackheart takes on Candice LeRae. Good back and forth in this match, and also I appreciate seeing Shotzi Blackheart do a dive on the outside and not look like she kills herself in the process. Indy Hartwell's all over this thing though. She makes her presence known repeatedly in the match. Finally at the end, she distracts Shotzi one more time when Shotzi's in the corner. Candice intercepts her and hits a swinging nightbreaker off the middle rope to win. So yeah, pretty solid opening match. We see the tag champs, Lorcan and Burch, and Pete Dunne roll up to the Capitol Wrestling Center. You hear Burch saying something to the camera, but their audio's not turned up, so it's kind of a moot point anyway. Then the NXT champion Finn Balor goes in the ring to talk about how he beat Kyle O'Reilly last week at New Year's Evil, and says that this time it's Kyle who's eating food through a straw. He talks about who his next opponents could be when suddenly Pat's Pack minus Pat shows up on stage. Pete Dunne with a microphone saying it's down to he and Finn, and the only reason that Finn is still the champion is because Pete has not taken the belt from him yet. Pete wants a fight, but Finn strikes first. It's a 3-on-1 attack. Suddenly Kyle O'Reilly shows up to make the save, and then out come Adam Cole and Roderick Strong from the UE to help kind of even the odds, and the heels run off. We get this moment here between Kyle and Finn where they might shake hands, they might fight. It's a 50-50 shot either way, but then ultimately Balor bails. So, you know, where's this going to go with Kyle and Finn? There is some kind of established mutual respect here after their two encounters, so where's this one going to go? Backstage, Johnny Gargano's interviewed. He puts over Candice LeRae's win earlier and also says that he and Austin Theory are going to become the Dusty Classic winners and the next tag team champions. Austin shows up with a folder that contains some artwork from Dexter LUMIS, some caricatures of Johnny and Austin they're not too thrilled about, so Austin tells Johnny to go kick his ass for him. By the way, have they made any merchandise based off Dexter LUMIS artwork? I know they sold some prints. A friend of mine showed me a print that he bought of Dexter LUMIS artwork, but I mean, there's an untapped potential in merchandise, shirt designs, or just something tangible with the LUMIS artwork on it. There's a lot, I think there's some potential in that. We go to our first match in the 2021 Dusty Classic as the Grizzled Young Veterans take on EVERFRISE. Zach Gibson with his trademark incendiary comments before the match begins, and then we see William Regal on the screen to say, "Welcome to the Dusty Classic. Let's begin." Thanks for that little cameo, GM Regal. The vets really work over EVERFRISE here, and I think it's a heel versus heel matchup. It's hard to tell which of these two teams is acting more heelish, but in the end we get a ticket to mayhem on Chase Parker. Drake and Gibson advance the tournament. Solid match, but just kind of hard to get into because it's hard to figure out which one I'm supposed to really root for. I do like EVERFRISE because, after all, EVERFRISE rules. We get a little promo package from Raquel Gonzalez talking about how she beat Rhea Ripley in the Last Woman Standing match last week, and now she has her eyes set on Io Shirai in the NXT Women's Championship. That field is really expanding as to who the next possible contenders could be for that one. Backstage, we see Shotzi Blackheart talking about her loss to Candice earlier, and how she's focused on the Women's Dusty Classic and brings out her tag team partner, Ember Moon. And so they issue a warning to the rest of the competition that they're going to come for the cup. And that team should be pretty interesting. On we go to see Dexter LUMIS versus Johnny Gargano, who, by the way, is rocking the Cleveland Browns look tonight. Early on, Dexter's got some great agility and some very sneaky, snaky movements on the outside, which is pretty impressive. He misses a swanton that allows Gargano to take over with a lot of strikes and stuff. Big kicks to the head of LUMIS, but Dexter stays resilient, and he ends up putting the silence on Gargano. Austin Theory gets on the apron, and that allows Gargano to roll up LUMIS to beat him. LUMIS grabs Theory after the match, but Johnny attacks Dexter. It's 2-on-1. Johnny grabs a chair, but in comes Kushida for the save. Get some submissions in stereo here. The hoverboard lock onto Johnny, and then the silence on Austin Theory, and Kushida standing tall above a fallen Gargano here, further cementing that this seems to be likely the next contender for the North American Championship, which again, I'm excited about. But I think that the theme tonight with the way, having Indy Hartwell and Austin Theory both meddling frequently in their mentors matches, it is on brand, but to have those two kind of matches back to back, it just seems kind of excessive at times. Pat's Pack interviewed backstage. Burch says that he and Lorcan are running things now in NXT, not the Undisputed Era. Meanwhile, Pete Dunne says he wants to get Kyle O'Reilly out of his way so he can challenge Finn Balor for the title. On we go to a pre-taped face-to-face between Timothy Thatcher and Tommaso Ciampa, or as I now call, based on a closed caption I saw for One Final Beat recently, Tommaso Circle K. T-Thatch says he's medically cleared to compete for next week in the fight pit, and Ciampa says he has to go into enemy territory in order to change the locker room culture, hence why he's going into the fight pit match. And Ciampa says he had an issue with Thatcher taking liberties and all those students in the Thatch as Thatch Can segments earlier, and Thatcher with a line saying a lion doesn't tell a zebra what he's going to do next, and Ciampa goes, "Do I look like a freaking zebra to you?" which is a great comeback. Some strong words are exchanged here, you know, not an amazing interview, but not at all terrible. All I can say is my body is ready for the fight pit next week. We get an interview backstage, the Undisputed Era, where Adam Cole says he puts over BREEZANGO and their abilities, but they're still going to beat them tonight in the Dusty Classic. And Kyle O'Reilly says he's going to be there at ringside to help keep the peace. Speaking of the Dusty Classic, our next match sees the unlikely pairing of Isaiah Swerve Scott and Jake Atlas taking on MSK, who are debuting tonight, and they were silhouettes in the bracket. So who are MSK? It's the former Rascals, Zachary Wentz and Desmond Xavier. They had a big emotional send-off on Impact a few months ago before officially signing with NXT, and this is their TV debut as MSK. Zachary Wentz is now Nash Carter, and Desmond Xavier is now Wes Lee. Wes Lee with a big dive to the outside before the break, and Vic Joseph says, "These rascals are flying high tonight." I see what you did there, Vic. It's a pretty fun match. MSK ends up winning after hitting their double team move on Isaiah to win and advance. So big debut for MSK. Welcome to NXT. You know, I have to admit, I've not actually seen any of the Rascals work prior to this. I've heard nothing but good things about them, but I've never actually seen them in action. So while we're here, folks, if you have some match recommendations for what I should watch or what we should watch if we're not familiar with the Rascals, MSK, and their work, sound off in the comment section. We see a vignette with Scarlett reading tarot cards and basically saying Karrion Kross is going after Finn Balor at some point soon. And then we see our next match as Xia Li takes on, who knows, because we don't see a name graphic and the announcers don't have time to say her name. By the time the match is over, it's 2 hits and the match is over. Xia wins, and then after the bell rings, the mystery woman on the throne commands her to put more of a hurting on her. So that's pretty much that. By the way, Xia's name graphic under her name had the words, and I apologize if I butcher the pronunciation, Tian Sha underneath. And so I was trying to figure out what that meant. I looked it up and I had a couple different translations. One meaning land under heaven or heavenly mountain, or my personal favorite, we get a promo from Kacy Catanzaro and Caden Carter on their role in the Women's Dusty Classic, and then we see backstage Swerve and Atlas are having a fight after what happened earlier tonight, and then Bronson Reed helps break it up. He gets into Swerve's face, so that seems to plant seeds for a match between them at some point in the future. In our main event, the last Dusty Classic match of the evening, as Adam Cole and Roderick Strong of the Undisputed Era take on BREEZANGO. Tyler Breeze really seems to be into cupping right about now. It's an okay match, nothing too spectacular here, but in the end, you got Lorcan, Birch, and Dunn jumping Kyle O'Reilly on the outside. Finn Balor actually returns the favor from earlier and makes the save, but he gets taken out. Kyle's taken out as well. Briefly distracted is Adam Cole here, but it does not cost them the match. They end up winning after Cole super kicks BREEZANGO in midair to win, so the UE advance, and they go to check on Kyle, who's all banged up and his jaw hurts and everything, as we fade to black. You know, I'm excited to see where this angle between the Undisputed Era and Pat's Pack ends up, how it's progressing in the aftermath of War Games last year. Where does Finn Balor fit into all this? That still remains to be seen. And as far as the again, the match itself, nothing too crazy, but the bigger story is what happens on the outside of the ring. It's night 2 of New Year's Smash on Dynamite, and the show begins with Eddie Kingston versus Pac, a match that's months in the making because Pac originally formed the Death Triangle with the Lucha Brothers, then Pac had to leave because of COVID, and Eddie Kingston stole Pac's friends. This is a great match. There's 2 guys who are just mad at the world, taking their anger out on each other, resulting in some great hard-hitting stuff and some great selling by Kingston too here in this match. Pac wins the Black Arrow, and then after the bell goes on to put the Brutalizer in, then suddenly the Butcher and the Blade run in, and the Lucha Brothers coming afterward. Then Lance Archer runs in and ends up chasing off Kingston's group. Archer gets in Pac's face and tells him, he needs to get on the same page. So again, unlikely partnership between, again, 2 other angry men, Pac and Lance Archer. Where is this going to end up? Where the allegiance ultimately lie? Time will tell. But also I'm interested in seeing what Lance Archer's hair is going to look like next week, because they taped this show earlier, and then we saw on social media that Archer apparently cut off his ponytail. So we'll see. Chuck Taylor takes on Miro next, and if Miro wins, Chuck becomes his butler for 30 days. This is a surprisingly squashy match. I was expecting more back and forth here, but Chuck only gets a couple of shots in, and it's all Miro besides that. He makes Chuck tap out to the game over, and that's that. And then my favorite part, though, is seeing later in the night when they advertise next week, they've got the match graphic, or the graphic for Miro and Kip and Penelope, and Chucky T is there. They've already photoshopped him onto a butler's tuxedo, which I thought was spectacular. We see Matt Hardy backstage with Private Party, and at first the two lads sound pleased as punch that they signed with Matt Hardy as their manager, but Mark Quinn cannot keep the facade up and basically calls out Matt for taking 30% of their income, and they call him a money-grabbing carny, and Matt just flips out on them and basically says, no one in AEW cares about you but me, and the fans don't care about you, and he even mentions he learned that the hard way after what happened at All Out, that the fans don't care about him, which is an interesting interpretation. But yeah, he basically just chews out Private Party, and since this interview is over, seems to solidify the heel turn we've been seeing kind of brewing for a long time on social media for Matt Hardy, and it's as the oppressive manager of the young stars who are now under his thumb via contract. That is a new twist for me. I'm not really familiar with that one. I always hear about stories of, storylines where a wrestler will leave a manager because the manager is secretly, embezzling funds or something like that. That's how Jimmy Snuka turned face on Captain Lou many years ago. But I mean, this is kind of interesting where they sign the contract, then Matt's revealed to be a dick, and then like the real oppression begins. So I'm really curious to see how long they keep it up. The Inner Circle arrived to make their New Year's resolutions, and in Jericho's case, hopefully his is to stop working concerts at super spreader events in Sturgis. Oh my God, like hearing recently that he had COVID during September, and despite the fact he worked like 5 matches that month, that's pretty insane. That sounds, I don't know how he got away with that or how, that just sounds like a massive breakout waiting to happen. And we heard similar stories with Nick Jackson, and of course Lance Archer was gone around that time. John Moxley was gone around that time for a scare. Sounds like it was a pretty scary thing. So maybe no more Fozzy concerts at Sturgis or just any other big super spreader events. So they go down the line over what their resolutions are going to be, and Jake Hager just goes, championships, yeah! And then MJF wants to strengthen his bond with his teammates and get rid of fat people. Ortiz wants to work on his grandma's sofrito recipe. Then Jericho says he wants he and MJF to become tag team champions this year, and Santana takes offense to that because he says, hey, you brought me and Ortiz in to be the tag team of the Inner Circle, and now you're going to be challenged for the belts on your own. And then Sammy Guevara chimes in and calls Jericho a tag team slut, which that should have been the name I had for my best tag wrestlers countdown a couple of months ago. Best tag team sluts. Then Jericho announces he wants to make a match to let out some steam and for bragging rights, basically. So he books a match, a 3-team tag team match within the Inner Circle. So Jericho and MJF, Santana and Ortiz, and Sammy Guevara and Jake Hager. Sammy and Hager. Sammy Hager. And Jericho's like, that's funny. And Sammy goes, why? He goes, never mind. That got to pop out of me. Sammy Hager. You love to see it. So we're having a 3-way match within the Inner Circle next week. Should be very good. At this point, I wonder, though, is this the beginning of the end where even though they resolved their issues and they got back together, something tells me that the situation with the Inner Circle is untenable. And like, we're going to see a tag team go and leave the ranks there. Most likely to me, it feels like it's Santana and Ortiz. At this point, I think the group's getting too big and they don't seem to like fit well with the rest of the group, and I'm wondering if they were just better on their own at this point. I feel that like any kind of hype they had about being the tag team in the Inner Circle was almost squashed immediately after they debuted as a group because the focus was more on like Jericho and Sammy Guevara, for example. But I don't know. We'll see how this all plays out. The Dark Order is backstage, and the group is asked what's next after the passing of Brody Lee. Evil Uno says they're all going to strive to be better people, and it begins with teaming with Adam Page next week. And John Silver puts Page on the spot and says, hey, next week after our match, you're going to make your decision if you'll join the group, right? And Page is basically, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And they're all very excited about the prospect of it, and that's where it ends. And I've been loving this relationship with Hangman and the Dark Order. And I said before, in particular, his reactions to like Silver and Reynolds, for example. I think it's precious and it's very wholesome. And so where Page will go after this, though, remains to be seen, but I'm very curious to where it'll go. We got a high package for the TNT title match later tonight, and And then we see backstage Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks getting ready for a 6-man tag match. They're very excited about teaming together. Suddenly it's time for that match. Kenny Omega comes out first. Don Callis brings out or introduces Kenny's partners and best friends, the World Tag Team Champions, the Good Brothers. Anderson and Gallows of Impact make their way back to the ring here to team with Kenny Omega. We cut backstage to see the Young Bucks looking kind of miffed, kind of they've been had, they don't know how to feel about this, as they're taking on Danny Limelight and the Varsity Blondes here in 6-man match. It's surprisingly competitive. I expected a total squash here, but it actually goes through a commercial break, picture in picture, and there's some good back and forth, a couple great moments for Pillman, for example, and Griff Garrison. Ultimately, there's a magic killer to Limelight, and the Elite win. Suddenly, Jon Moxley appears, and with no hesitation, charges the ring and goes after Omega, but it's 3-on-1 until the Lucha Brothers come in to make the save. We get a big pull-apart brawl as the locker room empties out. Moxley dives on to Omega. The Young Bucks come in and try and defuse the situation on Omega's behalf, but they get super kicks from the Lucha Brothers. Callis and Omega escape as, the brawl dies down. So what is going on with the Elite here? Omega seems to have preferential treatment for the Good Brothers over his other friends, the Young Bucks. The Young Bucks feel they're kind of being exploited or taken advantage of here. How often can that happen in this dynamic? And what are the Bucks' status? Are they underlings? Are they reluctant heels? Are they even heels at this point? Time will tell, but a lot of moving parts right now with this new and improved Elite. We then had the Dynamite debut of The Waiting Room, which is Britt Baker's talk show they've been doing on Dark before this. I appreciated the set they had, adjacent to the ring, and they had some the wrestlers turn around in their chairs to watch the show here like it's a live studio audience. Reba/Rebel is the Ed McMahon to Britt Baker's Johnny Carson, complete with iconic laugh, and Rebel's laugh is just so obnoxious and so funny. I pop for that. So Cody Rhodes is the special guest here, but it might as well have been a cardboard cutout because he gets no words in this thing. So basically, before Cody says a word, Jade Cargill comes in and talks some smack, saying, Shaq and I are waiting for my opponent. I keep forgetting that Shaquille O'Neal's involved in this angle, by the way. Then Red Velvet shows up and she slaps Jade. We get a lady pull-apart brawl here. Cody's trying to break it up. It's mad chaos here. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we do a hard cut to the big screen where they're replaying when Britt Baker beat up Thunder Rosa a few weeks ago. And then we see Thunder Rosa filming from some place, and the autofocus is all over the place on her shot. And she's basically saying that she is talking with Tony Khan, and she's got a match with her and Britt at Beach Break. And I love how Britt's like, that match is not happening. You told me I didn't have to wrestle her. And then the big screen just shows the match graphic. No! They're just so mad about that. There were some problems with this interview segment, if you want to call it that. I think it was not well rehearsed beforehand. It just seems like it was a big old mess. It's in the middle point when Red Velvet gets involved and everything. They kind of recovered it by the end once the Thunder Rosa promo came in. And I think, again, the beginning of it with Britt Baker showing up and Reba doing the laugh, I thought that was hilarious. So a bit of yin and yang with this one. There was some good to this one, some bad to this one. Ultimately, I'm going to say it's kind of a zero-sum game. Up next, Marco Stunt and Jungle Boy of the Jurassic Express take on FTR. I love that Jungle Boy comes up to Tarzan Boy now. That's his new licensed theme. Marco shows fire early on, is very defiant here, but FTR really work him over. He takes the brunt of the heat in this matchup here. I even forget when Jungle Boy's legal, if I'm being honest. Ultimately, Tully Blanchard gets involved after a couple of close calls. FTR win with the big rig on Marco. They renamed the Shatter Machine in honor of Brody Lee. So FTR win. It's a pretty good match. In your semi-main event for the NWA Women's title, you have Serena Deeb defending against Ty Conti of the Dark Order. It's a great match here. I'm very pleasantly surprised at how well this was done because Conti seems pretty unproven in AEW, but I mean, she looks great in this matchup. They're trading a lot of holds, very good technical stuff here, and Serena just elevates so many of her opponents, I find here. Ultimately, Deeb hits the detox to retain. Like I said, Ty looks good in defeat and makes up for how much of almost a train wreck the waiting room segment was. If we're comparing the two women's segments, I would say this is the stronger of the two because it's actually a good match as opposed to the interview segment, which had a couple of bright moments but almost completely fell off the rails. Main event time, TNT Championship match, months in the making, as Darby Allin defends against Team Taz's Brian Cage. Cage throwing Darby around just like he's nothing at the first part of this match here, right on down to the point where he gorilla presses Allin out of the ring and through the timekeeper's table within the first couple of minutes. They go hard pretty early here, but Darby remains defiant. He keeps kicking out at one. Ultimately, Cage sets up some steel stairs and it backfires. Cage bumps on the stairs and Darby with a coffin drop from the top to the outside onto the stairs. Some more close calls here. Darby at one point even takes his own belt off and ties it around Brian's legs to subdue him. Hook and Ricky Starks try to interfere, but the lights cut out and it's Sting. He shows up and actually gets physically involved this time. Decks Ricky Starks with the bat a couple of times. Darby with a crucifix bomb onto Cage off the middle rope and he pins him to win and retain the championship in this huge David versus Goliath matchup. It was a great match. You know, hard to watch at times with how much Darby bumped for Cage, but I think all of like the hope spots and the comeback for Darby seemed very much like it told a good story. I think it was a great way. Again, Cage, I don't think he looks bad here. He got outsmarted a little bit, and Cage can keep throwing him around for a while, and other wrestlers, and still look really strong and impressive. And Darby is just like such a fighter. You see it in this matchup here. I think it did a good job for both their characters. Time now for me to decide which show won for the week, NXT or AEW Dynamite, and this week I'm going to go with Dynamite. I think it had bigger and better matches overall. The six-man on AEW, though I'm not going to list it as a pro per se, was a welcome surprise because it was a lot more competitive than I thought it was going to be. But the squash match of MIRO versus Taylor, I was expecting a little bit better for that match, honestly. Nothing terribly wrong with NXT, I should say, this week. I think it was a mostly solid show, but I think AEW on the whole just entertained me a lot more. But what did you all think of NXT and AEW this week? Let me know in the comments section below. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.